In this demonstration, we will look at sites, subnets, and site links. Let's begin by looking at ADATM's organizational structure. They have an office in London, Toronto, and Paris. Each office has its own subnet, and the link between London and Toronto is very good, but the link between London and Paris is not very good. So let's see how we could implement this in Windows Server. Let's begin in Server Manager with the Tools menu and the Active Directory Sites and Services console. When the domain controller was created, a default first site was created. Sites represent the physical structure or topology of your network. So to make this more useful, we will rename the default site London. And then we can right-click the Sites node and add a new site for Toronto. And we will associate the default IP site link with the Toronto site and talk about what that means in just a minute. Notice the tool reminds us that Toronto should be linked to other sites with site links. We need to add subnets for Toronto, and we need to install one or more domain controllers in the Toronto site. And if we look at the London site servers, we can see it has 2 servers. But if we look at the Toronto servers, there are no servers. This is easy to fix. Simply right-click a server in the London site and move it to the Toronto site. The domain controller in the site will be responsible for replication, so it is very important that each site has a domain controller. Next, let's create the subnets. Simply right-click the Subnets node and select New Subnet. Our first prefix will be 172.16.100.0/24, and that's the subnet for London. And we'll repeat the process and create another subnet, and the prefix for this subnet will be 172.16.1.0/24. That is the subnet for Toronto. And a site can have one or more subnets. Lastly, let's take a look at the Intersite Transports IP node and the default IP site link. Site links describe the connections between sites and the logical path that's used to establish replication. So let's rename the default link to LON-TOR, and this signifies that this is information about the connection between London and Toronto. And every connection has a cost. The cost is relative, but links with higher costs are less likely to be used. So if the cost between London and Toronto is 100, the cost between London and Paris should be significantly higher, so there's less chance of using that poor connection. By default, sites replicate every 180 minutes, and you can actually schedule that. For example, you could schedule this in the middle of the night when the network traffic is low. In summary, you should create sites, subnets, and site links that mirror your network topology. And your course does have a lab on this, including a PowerShell version, so be sure to take a few minutes and give it a try.